Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtry air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtry air filters today at Filtry.com. Let's clear the air.
I had a sense that my back was broken, and I sort of wanted to, but I knew that it was dangerous if I moved because I could be completely paralyzed. So I lie there and I try to think, what do I do right now? Do I move my head? I don't move my head. What do I do?
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today's episode, we're talking to Henry Gold. Henry is the founder and director of TDA Global Cycling, and TDA stands for Tour d'Afrique, and that is based on their flagship trip, which is a tour clear across Africa from Cairo, Egypt to Cape Town, South Africa. And this started back in 2003 when Henry and his friend had been just tossing around the idea for years about bike touring across Africa and making it about a bigger purpose. Henry had been involved with a number of nonprofits at that time. He had a entire career with engineering and wanted to do something different. And this was the idea. This is what they came up with, was to just, tell their friends, get the word out there via the news, which actually worked really well. And they got over 30 people to go with them. And by the way, they didn't really know anything. They just went and made it happen. Bike tour across Africa, almost unplanned, and no one quit. A few people were injured, but everyone was okay. And it started this entire trajectory of Henry's life, later in life, by his own admission, after 50, of doing this incredible new career of taking people on these unbelievably long, life-changing adventures. And so I hope you enjoy the story. Henry talks a lot about his life, a lot about some things he's gone through, goes into some details about some of the stories that he's been through, some of the things he's endured, as well as some of the things his family's endured. But before we jump into that, I would love to tell you about a new podcast that's out by Expedia, and it's called Out Travel the System. As the world is opening up, I know you're probably tired of that phrase, so is travel, so is this opportunity to do things like biking across Africa. And sometimes, that inspiration through a podcast, wink, wink, it helps us get out there and helps us do more adventures. And a big part of adventure is obviously traveling, getting there. So if you could use some inspiration, or if you would like to listen to a new podcast, something else besides this show, we know this one's your favorite, but this might be your second favorite. You never know. I would definitely encourage you to listen to Out Travel the System. And speaking of travel, let's get right into Henry's story. And again, thank you for listening. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode. Very excited to get to know Henry and talk to Henry and about his experiences, what he's done over the years, and also about his company. Henry Gold, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. I'm excited to chat. Where are you coming from today, and where is home?
Home is Toronto, Canada. Yeah, Midtown, where I own a nice little house and a nice little backyard. So during COVID, that has been a very, very useful and practical. I grow my own vegetables as much as I can. I eat more than I grow, of course.
My goodness, that sounds like a nice little setup.
I've been very fortunate. I think essentially all my life I've been very fortunate. So, not everything is always perfect, but when you travel the world, when you see, when you come from the background that I came from, my parents and so on, I think it's always a way to keep strong, but it's also a way to keep things in perspective and enjoy what you got.
Well, tell us about that. What kind of family did you grow up in? Were y'all adventurous, or did you kind of have to discover that on your own?
No, I wasn't adventurous, although I did have a very adventurous mother. I grew up in eastern Slovakia, or what used to be Czechoslovakia, under the communist system. I was born 1952, so I'm a youngster, as you can tell.
Yes.
And I was there until I was the age 13, where we lived in a tiny town. I call it the village, essentially. I think 2,000 people. It was a type of childhood that many people experience when they live in very small places. You have a lot of freedom, and essentially everybody, they know you, so you can't get away with too many things if you're when you become too mischievous. But I had the freedom that the children have in that sort of situation. I had a bicycle from young age, so I could roam around to villages and forests and so on. And I did have one teacher that obviously made an impact on me. It was, I think, from grade 5 on. Well, I was only there for a couple more years. Who had this theory that you explore the world, but you first started in your own surrounding, and you keep making your circle bigger. And bigger and bigger. And when I look at my life right now, it's sort of interesting because, it's essentially what has happened. Whenever I come to a place, I always explore the near surrounding, and it sort of grows. When I get to a new city or a new town, I start with what's around the hotel or what's around the campsite. And then I just tend to explore more and more as with time and the resources available, whether it's walking or cycling, and sometimes obviously with a car.
I have to tell you, I'm the same way. I don't think I can. One of my favorite things to do is just go down a new road I've never been in my town, or just it's all around you, just turning over these little rocks. It doesn't have to be these big grand things. It really is just, let's see what's down here, or let's go this way. And
Exactly.
and that's been just an awesome way to live. It keeps adventure close.
Yeah, and curiosity and so on, all of these things. I'm a big fan. I always preach it. Drives my partner a little crazy, because whenever we go out, I always want to go just a little further.
Well, I tell you what, it serves you well, because now you've been doing this for a living for a long time. But what were some of the things that led up to that? So you had that influential teacher. Did you start exploring with this curiosity in mind in a bigger way or in a more organized way at an early age?
Well, no, what happened at the age of 13, we emigrated first to Israel and after 3 years to Canada. And, and that kind of exploration is forced on you, whether you like it or not. You come to a new place, you don't speak the language. So first, you learn language, but you just learn about your surrounding, again, sort of how to survive, essentially. I was sent at the age when I moved to Israel. I was sent to an agriculture boarding school of a sort, but we had to work half a day and go to school half a day, and that's where I learned Hebrew. And then after 3 years, we emigrated to Canada, where I finished high school and went to university, did my degree in engineering. But that kind of a instinct now that, once you leave home, that instinct of exploring other places, you feel more comfortable. You don't worry about going to places you don't speak the language. And that sort of was kind of already part of my life. And then I was very fortunate at university again. University I went to had a winter carnival. If you participated in a winter carnival, they had a draw, and the draw was a ticket to fly to Europe. But the condition of the draw was that you had to be actually present in the room when they were drawing. And so at the end of the evening at the ski hill, we were in this bar type of a thing, and they were drawing names, and most people already went home or left. And then one by one, they kept drawing names that a person wasn't in there. And then as they were drawing, I said to myself, what will happen? Well, how would I react if they called my name or my number? Of course, the next thing they did is actually called my name or my number. And so I won this trip to Europe, or a ticket to Europe anyway. So again, very fortunate.
Where did you go? How was that trip?
I flew to Paris, from Montreal to Paris, and then I hitchhiked around Europe for the summer. literally hitchhike. I was 19 years old. I didn't even have a Canadian passport. I only had a laissez-passer, if you know what that is. I don't even know if people know what it is.
I don't.
It's a document which allows you to cross borders. And I hitchhiked through Europe, and I came back, and again, the form was set. Once you go through all this kind of adventures and meeting new people, and just very stimulating. You meet people from around the world. People were treating me very nicely overall, and so as I said, the stone was set. And you just get that urge then all the time, to explore and to go somewhere. And that's how it was. And then, so I graduated in engineering. I worked as an engineer for 8 years for American multinationals. And then I wasn't particularly happy as an engineer. I didn't think this was my calling. Through coincidences, I met a young medical doctor, just finished university, who wanted to set up an NGO, an organization, a voluntary organization that would work in Africa, sort of like what Médecins Sans Frontières is, Doctors Without Borders. And we chatted, and eventually I said, you know what, I'll help you get it off the ground. He didn't have any practical skills, not very pragmatic individual. So I said, I'll commit 6 months, and I'll go to Africa, I'll set up the first project. And we did get the funding, and I went to Africa for 6 months, to Sudan, Eastern Sudan. This was just before the famine hit in Ethiopia. You may remember, if you're old enough, that horrendous famine where over 1 million people died. I was at the border, and we were treating all kinds of people who were coming through, and I did that 6 months. It was, again, a tremendous learning experience. And I came back. When I came back, I sort of decided I was going to move on because I wasn't happy with the approach of Doctors Without Frontier, because they were doing what I call emergency work. And I'm an engineer. I like to see long term. Sure, when I break an arm, I need to go to the emergency. But really, the trick is to heal and to go back to normal life. And so I said to the doctor, if this is what you want to do, that's fine. I have no problem, but no future for me in this. But he changed his mind. He said, okay, let's do it your way. And we continue with this organization. And at that time, actually, the news, the BBC just broadcasted this horrendous footage from Ethiopia, what was actually happening inside Ethiopia. There was some Canadian group was planning to go there, and they asked me, because I came from the border, and they asked me to give them some briefings. And when I went to the briefing and the question being asked, I said to myself, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster. These people have no idea what they're doing. And so I spoke to my partner and the doctor who was he was the president. So he was the volunteer, if you will. And we decided, you know what, we're going to send a mission to Ethiopia directly. We're going to get organized. We're going to do our own thing. And we did. So I went to Ethiopia and worked a little bit there and set up a base camp. And the organization then just stayed and grew and kept growing from Ethiopia to other places. And for 9 years, we went essentially from zero to a $9 million budget a year. Several countries in Africa, and I was getting burned out. The bigger the organization, the more successful it became, the more the demand to raise more and more money, and the more the demand by the founders to tell you what to do, how to do, and when to do. And I just didn't like that, and nobody wants to support you when you're starting out. And then when you are a success, then everybody's telling you how to do it. I decided, I had enough, and I left. The organization is still around, by the way. It has contracted and doing their own thing. That really, besides sending them a little bit of money every year just for old time's sakes, I don't really have anything to do with them. But it's still around. And so I did that for 9 years, but again, got a good taste of Africa. Learned a lot, tremendous amount. Very satisfying. Very, it's always, to me, it's I learned a lot about myself, how I act under stress and pressure, and I realized that I actually thrive on it to a certain extent. And that, I think, comes from genetics. I think it comes from my mother particularly. And in fact, that's what I always wanted to find out. I heard my mom was a survivor of Auschwitz concentration camp, 3 years.
No kidding. Holy cow.
I knew the stories. I knew, and you sort of always, as you grow up, you sort of measure yourself. Well, how tough could I be? How would I react to stress? How would I do? What I would do when when essentially, I don't want to sound too dramatic, but when your life is on the line, what do you do? And so, Africa, working in war zone in Mozambique and Ethiopia and other places. As I said, it's challenging, but it's in many ways it's the highlight of my life. When you're helping people and you see it, in front of your eyes. When you come to a disaster situation and you come there 2 years later again, and you're seeing that trees are growing and people coming and hugging you and saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, there's no bigger satisfaction in life than having an old man running to you and hugging you. Because you helped, you did something for his town, for his village, for the area. So that's what happened. And as I said, then after that, I was a little burned out. I decided I needed something else. I came back to Canada, but I wasn't particularly happy with Canada. I thought I needed something different. So I decided to go back to Israel, where, as I said, I had some interesting teenage years and I spoke the language. So I went there. And again, it was supposed to be just for a year. I ended up there 9 years working with peace issues and environmental issues and transportation, and sort of thing. I did that for 9 years, and then I came back to Canada, and I was actually trying to get a project going with the World Bank in the Kalahari Desert to deal with the Bushmen, to set up income generation projects with the Kalahari Bushmen. And it was a competition with the World Bank, something they called marketplace of ideas, where they pitched around a competition around the world where they're saying, you people out there know better than we sitting in ivory towers, at least you keep telling us. So we're gonna accept ideas for projects from around the world, and then the best of them we will fund. So my sister, who happened to live in Washington, in fact happened to work in the next building for International Monetary Fund, she said to me, while I was in Israel, she said, "This is for you. You always think you can fix the world." So here's an opportunity for original ideas. So I started this whole process. It was a complicated process where you first submit an idea in one page, and if they winnow it down, and you go to the second round and third round and fourth round and fifth round, and at the end, I and about 150 people, 150 projects from around the world were invited to Washington, D.C. for this final, where they're going to choose about 40 of them or so, 40 or 50, and they're going to fund them. So my project was one of them, and we came to Washington. Sorry, we didn't go to Washington. What happened was 9/11 hit, and everything was delayed, and eventually there was a final I believe it was in January 2002. And my project was, to a certain extent, dependent on tourism. And of course, because 9/11 killed tourism for a while, so I wasn't one of the people who got elected or won the trip. And I sort of said, okay, what am I going to do now? And I had this other idea of doing a bicycle tour across Africa, which is a different story, how it originated. And I said, well, let's try this one. If I can have this, if one door closes, another door opens. And basically that's how I got into the Tour d'Afrique, or into starting this company.
Yeah, tell us about the origin of that and how. I mean, that's a big change, and that's a huge idea. Huge idea.
So the origin of the idea goes back to when I literally was working in Ethiopia, and I saw this, and I'm sure most of us seen these pictures of particularly women carrying all these loads in Africa. Poor woman, and whether it's going to find wood, or whether it's carrying water, or whether it's carrying produce to the market, that's the mode of transportation to many, many villagers. And in fact, Ethiopia, it was in those days, and that's not that long ago, there were 2 or 3 main arteries, and vehicles were rare, and trucks are usually big truck for big companies. Either Coke or beer or food being transported by government officials. So transport was very limited. And having grown up in Slovakia, which was sort of, after World War II, transport was also a major issue, and people used bicycles. And of course, I knew from engineering time and from, India and China that bicycle was the way to expand your market. So I would see this woman and I said to myself, what Ethiopia and what Africa needs is cheap bicycle, cheap, rugged bicycle. Now, there were bicycles. You could buy a bicycle from China or from India. But a bicycle that would cost $35, $40 in India would cost $150 to $200, $250 in Africa. And that's just beyond any villager. That's just no way. So I kept saying, how do you lower the market? Well, you lower the market by creating competition. And so I sort of thought, well, somebody's got to set up a factory in Africa and force a reduction of create a competition, reduce the price. So this was an idea. I was busy. I was busy with my organization. I was also at that time producing documentary films about Africa. With some other partners as well. I was very busy. But anyway, some Canadian fellow with an MBA who I actually met in Sudan approached me and he asked, Henry, I want to work with you in Africa. So I said, look, I have this crazy idea. You have an MBA. Maybe we can raise some money, send you to Nairobi and do a feasibility study for producing bicycles in Africa. And he liked the idea, and we put some proposal together, and lo and behold, we got the money, and he went off to Nairobi and for a 6-month stint to do a feasibility study. And he as I was sitting with him in Nairobi discussing, the feasibility looked good. It looked like it could fly. We even had local support. Some finances were coming around. We could do it. So we thought, well, let's take it next step. Let's start thinking how we could set it up and what it requires. And so one of the questions that he popped out, well, okay, and how are we going to market this thing? How are we, funding is going to be difficult, and particularly in marketing. And I said, well, that's easy. We'll just do what Branson does. Branson, the multi-billionaire from England, the adventurer.
Oh, yeah, Richard Branson.
Of course. So I said, we'll do just something crazy like him. So we won't pay for marketing. They'll write about us. And he said, well, what do you think? What do you have in mind? I said, well, we're going to do a bicycle race from Cairo to Cape Town using this rugged, cheap, simple bicycle. And since the idea was so crazy, there's no way you're going to do this. There's no way you're going to succeed, et cetera, et cetera. I said, well, they're gonna write about us, and that's going to be our publicity, our marketing strategy. So that's kind of where it started. Now, what happened next was that my partner, my colleague who did the actual study, who wanted to be entrepreneur on paper, but when he realized that entrepreneurs don't get paid for many years, he got cold feet, and at the same time he got a very good offer from Deloitte to work as a consultant for them. So he got cold feet, and I was, as I said, very busy with what I was doing. So I just put the project aside. But then a few months later, my board member, that NGO, suggested that he heard about my bicycle idea production, and he said, Henry, I want you to meet someone. And he set up a meeting. And he was a Canadian-Dutch fellow, a very avid cyclist, a racer actually, who actually had a little factory producing some parts for bicycles. So we had lunch, and I told him about the idea, and he said, Henry, you don't want to go into bicycle business. You don't stand a chance. You have no idea how the Indians and Chinese operate. They're going to lower the market until they, it's going to drive you. It's just not. But I love the idea of Cairo to Cape Town as a bicycle race. So let's do it. And, it took a while. I thought about it, and then I said, all right, let's one day maybe. And then we actually decided, let's do it. That was in 1993, just before I quit the organization. So we put a proposal, we put a little brochure together. We were this is before internet. We needed to figure out a sponsor because there's no way you could market this without any sponsorship. And then there was a terrible, terrible terrorist attack in Egypt, where about 60, 70 German tourists were massacred. And we sat around and looking at each other and said, well, this is not going to fly right now. There's no way anybody's going to give us any money. So we put it aside. And as I said, then I left for Israel. He got into a terrible car accident, spent 6 months in a hospital. And years started going by. My partner, the fellow the fellow that wanted to do this bicycle race across Africa. And so we just kind of periodically once a year spoke on the phone, or when I came to visit Canada, we would have a cup of coffee. But when that World Bank project didn't happen, I picked up the phone and I said, Michael, remember, we've been talking about this now for 10 years. Well, it's now or never. I'm turning 50. It's now or never. If we are going to do this bicycle thing across Africa, I'm not getting any younger. Are you in or are you out? And, 24 hours later, he said, I'm in. And that was in February, literally my birthday, I believe. And I turned 50 in 2002. And by January 2003, there were 35 of us standing in front of the pyramid with bicycles ready to roll.
Holy cow,
That's what happened.
And you were going from Cairo to Cape Town.
Cairo to Cape Town.
Self-supported?
No, it wasn't self-supported. We figured out. So the idea was very simple, and I'm not Mr. Bimon that you interviewed. I'm not a super athlete, and so the way we figured out, we're going to create a kind of expedition where the average people, older than me, younger than me, who are not necessarily avid athletes, be able to do this. And we came up with a concept that we're going to average sort of 60, 70 miles a day. And we're going to have two big supporting vehicles, 2 trucks, which will carry everything from support staff to food and water and emergency supplies and stuff like this. And that we are essentially going to try to cycle in 100 cycling days or 120. The concept was we would cycle about 5 days on average and then take a rest day. And the rest day would be ideally either in big cities, capital cities, where people can reconnect, or we can buy supply, or people can do a segment. So some people join us just for one segment. So, for example, Cairo to Khartoum, Sudan was one segment. That was about 2.5 weeks. Khartoum to Addis Ababa was another segment, and so on. And so that was the concept, that we would do this. It wasn't properly scouted. In fact, part of the roads, none of us ever been on. So we had no idea what's awaiting. We had no idea where we were going to sleep. It was all in tents. So I would always give instruction to the driver ahead with the vehicle that, you drive 60 miles or so, and you start looking for a place where you can find camping and water for 30, 40 people. We were actually around 40 with staff, 40 plus people. So I had no idea. Some days would be 60 miles, some days would be 80. We had simply no idea where we're going to sleep and what we're going to encounter and how difficult is going to be the road. 40% was essentially off-road, so dirt roads that we were going to do, and that was fine, except when it rainy season in Africa with dirt roads, some of them were essentially mud roads. So bicycles, mountain bikes would go 60 miles much faster than the trucks. So the instruction to the fastest rider, because we didn't cycle as a group, everybody went in their own speed. So the instruction to the fastest rider was you cycle around 60 miles or so, and then find a tree and sit and wait until the truck shows up, or until one of us, the organizer, shows up on a bicycle, and then take charge. So that was the concept. And of course, now the biggest challenge for us, first of all, nobody has ever tried crossing with bicycles borders, so nobody knew how challenging that was. But more to the point, there were areas starting from Egypt through several countries where you were either going to military zones or conflict zones where you had to where they would only allow convoys. And so we had no idea what that would happen. I managed, again, through my contacts and through my work in Africa, essentially to negotiate the passage through this. And I was given a permission to do it without being in a convoy. So imagine when we are going through southern Egypt, and the road is essentially empty. We are just on it, and you cycling, and we are spread around. The fastest cyclists are real racers. They're maybe 30 miles ahead of me or 40 miles ahead of me. I'm in the back going slow and looking, and then all of a sudden a convoy of 50 or 60 buses passes by you with all tourists going to southern Egypt, and they're like, what's going on? Every 200 meters or so, they see a bicycle waving it. So it was quite a scene. Of course, the cyclists were always very nervous because they had most of them have never been in conflict zones, so they had no idea what to anticipate. So they were all nervous. Sometimes they went as a group, bunched as a group, and some of them would hang around with me, even though I was very slow, because they didn't feel comfortable cycling by themselves. But we had no issue. We have no problem. We did have some support from Egyptian army. There was one vehicle in the front and one with the first cyclist, and one vehicle with me or behind, whoever was behind. And that was sort of the protection, if you will, that we had. Similar thing. We were in northern Kenya and through Ethiopia. We through Tanzania, we went through area which was all dirt road, and years ago they had all kinds of banditry there. So there was very little traffic, but again, through my contacts, I was assured that was years ago, nothing to worry about, and they were right. So yeah, we did this. The first one in particular, it was a lot of tension, a lot of stress on people's, and of course, I felt comfortable, but you never know. You just never know.
I just have so many questions about that, and just how you figured it out, how you made it happen, how you got 40 people to go with you. I mean, I don't know 40 people that would want to go do that or could afford it or would have the time.
Well, again, fortune, when you have a positive outlook on life and things you believe things are going to work out. In this case, what happened, again, I was very fortunate. I have a very good friend here in Toronto who is a well-known journalist, who periodically, when I traveled the world, I pitched him some stories, some of the idea he used. And when I first told him this in 1993, that we are thinking, I have this crazy idea going through Africa on a bicycle, he loved it. He just thought, this is great. So in 2002, when me and my partner set up the website, I picked up the phone and I called my friend Michael, and I said, Michael, I need to pick your brain. I need to find out how I can get some publicity on this idea. And Michael worked for the Globe and Mail, which is, the New York Times of Canada, if you will, at least in those days. And we had a cup of coffee, and he said, you don't need any publicity. I'm going to write a story. It's going to be on the front page of the Globe and Mail. And I laughed. I said, come on, Michael, we are old buddies. Don't humor me. And he said, no. I'm telling you, it's a great story. You'll get on the front page of the Globe and Mail. I said, Michael, we haven't done anything. We're just saying we're going to do this. He says, Henry, anyway. So he came and interviewed me and my partner and brought a photographer, and then we were ready to roll. So he called me up and he said, you're going to be on the front page of the weekend edition on Saturday. And I kind of, I didn't take it seriously because, again, I had some experience with media before, and I knew that stories get canceled and things change. And, so I didn't think much of it. And anyway, Saturday morning, I get a phone call from him, and there's kind of a low voice and say, Henry, I'm so sorry. And I said, oh, Michael, don't worry about it. And he said, you're not on page 1, you're on page 4.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was a big story, essentially full pictures. And, within 24 hours, we were getting emails from as far as Sydney and as far as Tokyo. It sort of taught me a big lesson, how the impact by now we had the internet, and, stories are shared. And literally, it's only 10 years later from when we originally thought of this, and the impact, the world has changed significantly. And the impact of this was that, we were, all of a sudden, people heard about it around the world very quickly. And then we followed up with some of this, then we started reaching, once we realized that the media likes this, my partner, who I said was Canadian-Dutch, flew to Holland, where the Dutch media picked up on it that he was Dutch, and we got some stories from there. So we got some Dutch people who were interested in coming. Yeah, so we sort of tried to approach the media. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. We approached the New York Times. They promised a big story, and of course, at the end, they didn't do a thing. And but so that's essentially how we got it. And then I was, how one story then carries you. The radio approached you, or we approached CBC. They interviewed me, and the approach I took on this interview was that, I'm not an athlete. I don't have any superpower. I'm not a young person, but I think I can do this. So other people who heard me said, yeah, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
That is awesome. And it seems like this was the launching pad for what you're doing even today.
Exactly. So it sort of expanded, once we reached South Africa in the last few days, there were 4 or 5 the back group that sort of, we were all cycling slow and enjoying ourselves and stopping, chatting to locals and having drinks there with locals and so on. So one of them, as he was cycling beside me in the last few days, says to me, "Okay, Henry, we're there. We made it. What are we doing next?" And I just sort of said, "Well, what do you mean what are we doing next? Silk Route."
Right. It must have gone well enough that you had the confidence and it was that rewarding where you said, we need to do something else. We need to do this again.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, our fiscal model for this was that, this is going to be so difficult, so challenging for people, particularly who have never been to Africa, which essentially was just about all of them, that half of them, by the time we reach Nairobi, half of them are going to be gone. They're going to quit, they're going to go home. And that's one of the reasons why we were going to big cities. As we were coming to Nairobi, a halfway point, I was lying in my tent and I was thinking, like, what's going on here? I don't get it. Everybody here is hungry all the time. They're dirty. They're not getting enough water to drink and to wash, and they're exhausted because we were really pushed. You're doing 60 miles on dirt road and hills and so on. I mean, and day in, day out. This is not one day. And I'm saying, like, what the heck is going on? How come nobody's quitting here? And not only nobody's quitting, they're all happy. People who have never squat toilet, all of a sudden, people who are using a liter of water bottle to wash themselves at the end of the day. Like, how the hell are these people so happy? What's going on here? I couldn't get it. And eventually I figured out that, that there's a certain joy to pushing yourself and learning and stressing out and all sorts of other things. There's a real attraction to it, and a real learning experience about yourself, about the world, about changing your habits, about your limitations, and so on and so on. So to me, there was a magic to it, and myself included. I was never in such a good shape in my whole life, and I couldn't understand what's going on. How come I'm feeling so good?
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible.
Your AC works overtime all summer, so be sure to replace your old air filters with new Filtrete air filters. They recommend updating HVAC filters at least every 3 months all year round. So order your Filtrete air filters today at Filtrete.com. Let's clear the air.
Clorox knows you want your clothes smelling fresh and clean, but so what happens? That's why we created Clorox fabric sanitizers to freshen up your clothes between washes, pre-treat extra stinky laundry, and make sure every last odor comes out in the wash. Clorox fabric sanitizers take care of all that and eliminate 99% of odor-causing bacteria. Plus, they're bleach-free and safe for all colors and fabrics. When it counts, trust Clorox.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
That is a really fascinating observation. And would you say for that first experience, how bad was the worst aspect of it in the sense of danger or in the sense of, social unrest in some of the countries you're going through? Did your worst fears ever happen?
So, being kind of a pragmatic and practical person, engineer, if you will, I always sort of said, one has to look at life with what's real and what's perceived dangers. Now, perceived dangers are everything that people think, war zones and diseases and you name it. But the real danger, believe it or not, going through Africa, in fact, through any of the world, We've been now, I cycled through 80 countries, and I've been on 6 continents cycling. The real danger is the same as in Toronto. These are called drivers. If you look at statistics, how people get hurt, when Americans travel, how do they get hurt? When Canadians, all of us travel. When you look statistically, is it terrorist attack? Is it kidnapping? Is it even worse? When you compare the real numbers, it's mainly accidents from roads. And we actually faced that. We were actually in Zimbabwe. We were a driver, essentially on an empty road because there was gasoline shortage. We had the roads to ourselves, and a driver full with cars coming from a wedding hit 3 of our riders. Again, when I came across that accident where the rider that looked the most seriously hurt was lying on top of the windshield of the car that hit him. There was blood coming out of his mouth, and we didn't move him. We waited for an ambulance. When I took a look at him, I said to myself, he's never going to walk again. Because he literally landed with his helmet on top of the windshield. That the force of the accident threw him into the air, and he landed with the head on the windshield. Anyway, and the second rider too was in terrible shape. Bottom line, to tell you again how fortunate it is, we took him to a hospital, and he was x-rayed head to toe, and the doctor came to me and he said to me, Henry, we're going to observe him overnight, the two of them, just to make sure there's no internal injuries, but they're fine and they'll be riding in a week. And he was right. We had to get two new bicycles somewhere, or repair the bicycle.
Yeah, did they even want to ride after that?
Oh yeah. These people are, it's in fact it's the best thing. You want to get on a bicycle very quickly, because you want to just get over it. You don't want to deal with PTSD afterwards. The best thing is to get back in the saddle. This is what they do with pilots when they crash, apparently. So this is the closest thing that happened. This is the real danger. And I say this over and over again, over years and years of hundreds of thousands of miles that we have cycled around the world in large groups. The most dangerous thing is the driver. It happens rarely. Close calls are plenty, or at least people think there are close calls. But we did have a rider who was killed in China, again on a very quiet road. The driver got a flat tire, lost control of his vehicle. Obviously, was driving way too fast and killed one of our riders. And so that's the only serious accident as far as vehicles. We have had other, motorcycles hitting a cyclist and they fall off and hurt themselves. We had that kind of accidents. Minor brushes when, the vehicle does touch you or something and you fall and you hurt yourself. But the only serious one that we had was that. But there's plenty of close calls. Yes, there's plenty of, vehicles coming way too close, and things like this do happen. And I wrote a piece 2 or 3 years ago when a rider was hit here in Toronto that I cycle around the world, and cycling on Main Street of Toronto, I have more fear than cycling anywhere else in the world. And it's true, because the main street in the grid of Toronto don't have bike lanes, and inevitably if you ride like I do all the time, you got to use it sometimes. And the vehicles are, the speed limit is 40 miles an hour or so, or 35 miles an hour, 60 kilometers. But of course the drivers are going 80 kilometers an hour. I really do have fear whenever I come to the major road like that.
But I wanted to hear a story from you about, obviously, you started TDA cycling after this experience, global cycling at some point, and you've been doing that for years. I want to hear the story about being approached by an elephant. You had an encounter. Can you tell that story?
Right. So as we were talking, you asked me the real dangers, and I told you perceived and real dangers. So, over the years, one of the key questions always from people who have never done anything like this is it safe? Is it safe? And I would always tell people, essentially, don't worry. Don't worry about war zone. Don't worry about kidnapping. Don't worry about terrorism. Don't worry about the wildlife, which is a lot of people who worry about wildlife. The only thing you have to worry is with drivers. So there you go. The irony of ironies, the only person who had a real serious running with the wildlife was me in India.
Oh my gosh.
We were cycling in southern India. We had a wonderful first time. We were cycling a tour through India, and I had plenty of apprehension. I'd never been to India before. I had plenty of apprehension. A country with 1 billion plus people, busy, and I thought, how are we going to find peaceful and quiet roads to cycle? Anyway, it was a wonderful trip, and we were nearing the end. I think we had 10 days to go. We were in a southern India, going through quiet roads between two national parks. We stayed in a lovely lodge, and then our style is that you have breakfast, you park in, put your bag on a vehicle and get going. And so people go one at a time, or two or four at a time. And anyway, I usually go slow, and often I'm the sweep. And we had an American lady, young woman, who actually was with me at one point in Africa, and she was having a problem with the bicycle, so I was helping her. And so everybody was gone, and the vehicles were gone, and we finally fixed a little problem, and she was off, and we were maybe 5 miles on this very quiet road, forested road, kind of a single lane road, Indian road, that connects between small town villages and between, as it happened to be, two national parks where there were elephants. Nobody mentioned to us that the wild elephants tends to move from one park to another. But anyway, so we were cycling. She was ahead of me about 25 yards or so. We were going up the hill about, as I said, 5, 6, 7 miles from where we just left the lodge. And then all of a sudden ahead of us, and we were going on a hill. It wasn't a steep hill, but it was a hill. It was, I would say, about 100 yards in front of her, and I was about 25 yards behind her. There was an elephant with two young ones crossing the road. And I was so happy because this lady, we have a section in Botswana, which we call Elephant Highway in Africa, where you see a lot of elephants. And she was the only one when she went to Africa, didn't see those elephants there. So I said to myself, wow, isn't that something? Now she's getting the bonus. She's seeing elephants, but she didn't see in Africa. And the elephant's peaceful crossing. And as I said, I have had encounters with wildlife all my life. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't particularly worried. The elephant wasn't paying any attention to us. There was a vehicle that happened to pass us and honked at the elephant. The elephant doesn't seem to mind at all. Didn't worry. So we kept cycling. And then I kept thinking, I want to catch a glimpse of this elephant. So I kind of imagined the spot where the elephant disappeared into the forest, because, as I said, it was a forested area. And as I got to this point, and I said to myself, well, I'm here. Either the elephant is now completely gone, it's in the bush, I can't see him, or I already passed the spot where they disappeared. And as I had this thought, literally out of the bushes, charging elephant coming at me full charge. And I don't know if you've seen an elephant run full charge, but they can run. I think at the time I saw him was maybe 10 yards from me. And so I had to sort of figure out what to do at this point. And my thought was, well, I'm going to make a U-turn and go downhill, because that way I can get some momentum and get away from the elephant. But being a single lane, I had to figure out not to go on the dirt. So I tried to make a sharp turn and I fell. At which point I sort of thought, well, the only chance I have right now is to run into the forest and zigzag in the forest somehow. So the elephant, I made a quick decision. Your mind, it's not like you have plenty of time. Your mind just takes over what to do. And I saw the elephant coming, and I sort of almost decided I was going to run almost towards him, sort of slightly to an angle, so to force him to make a sharp turn, so to slow him down. And I did, I ran, and I heard behind me the elephant stepping on a bike. So I sort of congratulated myself that it worked. And then I thought, well, I need to make another. By then I was in the forest, sort of on the outskirts in the trees. I thought I need to make another sharp turn here to slow him down again. And as I was making a sharp turn, I felt the trunk, something getting hold of my ankle, and the trunk of the elephant, and I was in the air. At that point, I just sort of said, well, I got to go into a baby position to give him as little space as possible. And the next thing I remember was, or the next thought I recall was my helmet cracking, and the thought that possessed me, which was very weird. I thought later on was, well, this is very interesting. What happens next? To my every time I tell the story, I said, well, my life didn't pass through in front of my eye. There was nothing except what happened next. And what happened next, I don't know, because I either lost consciousness or, some people believe that the brain deletes the painful parts. What I do recall, or the next recollection that I have is when I'm now flat on my back, and I see the elephant disappearing in a bush, running away from me. How long he played with me, rolled me over, stepped on me, I don't know. But he broke a bunch of bones, but I was flat on my back and seeing him disappear. And so I lay on my back for, I don't know how long, half a minute. And then because just a few months before that, I undertook some wilderness rescue training on injured people. So I started checking myself slowly, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, what's broken and what doesn't. So I went through sort of self-testing. I moved my toes first. I moved my one toe, the second toe. I lifted my knee. Each time I congratulated myself that things are working. And I said, this is not too bad. And then I had to figure out, I had a sense that my back was broken. And I sort of wanted to, but I knew that it was dangerous if I moved because I could be completely paralyzed. So I lie there and I try to think, what do I do right now? Do I move my head? I don't move my head. What do I do? But then sort of a moment of panic where I convinced myself that I have to move my head because otherwise they'll never find me anyway. I'm in the forest. So I might as well take the chance. So I lifted my head and I did. And there was no pain. So I was kind of happy that, I could do that. So then I decided, well, can I put myself to a sitting position, which I did. But by then I realized that my left arm, my shoulder, my wrist was completely, it was broken in several pieces. I had difficulty seeing from my left eye. And that happened to be also orbital bone in my eye was fractured. There was my lower back was fractured as well, but obviously not that seriously. I had eventually also found out I had ribs fractured, but I managed to sit a little bit, and then I figured getting up this is really stupid, so sit and wait for help. But then I decided maybe that young lady ahead of me, maybe she heard it, she saw it, so I yelled her name. She didn't respond. I yelled again. She didn't respond. And I said, all right, let's try as hard as I can. So I yelled as hard as I can. And that she did respond. She was not very far. She was on the road. So she must have seen or heard or something because she came back. I basically just said, don't come here. Just pick up the phone in my bag and call an ambulance. And just, I need your help right now, but stay cool because if you lose your cool right now, you're not help to me.
That is wild. And
she made a call. She had her own phone. She made a call. She didn't call the ambulance. She called the tour leader, who was ahead of us. And he was actually the partner that we practiced first date on each other when we took that wilderness course. So he was a few kilometers ahead of us. He literally commandeered a local vehicle. Just told him, drive back. And they were there within minutes, and he kind of took over. They called an ambulance, and I was rescued. I was taken to a town which we passed the day before, which wasn't very far. They patched me up there, and then a 2-hour drive to a major hospital in Mysore, in the big city, where I had emergency surgery there that evening. And that was it. I had to have another surgery a year later because the upper arm, which was an open fracture, which I was very, very fortunate I didn't bleed to death. But essentially, I had a full recovery, and 4 or 5 days in the hospital, but still lying in a hospital with my computer on my lap and typing with one finger. I wrote this blog saying, for years I've been telling everybody not to worry about elephant, but today's subject, not to worry about wildlife, where today's subject is, guess what happened to me?
My goodness. Oh my gosh. Well, at least it was you, you know what I mean? And not one of your guests, one of your clients.
Absolutely.
What a story. My
Absolutely.
goodness. I mean, no telling what happened while you were unconscious.
Yeah, no idea. I really don't know
or
how
how
long.
close you really were to the thing crushing you. It's unbelievable.
As it turned out, and as I was lying in a hospital, I sort of, decided to investigate elephant accident. And as it happened in India, apparently there's average 300 to 400 people a year getting killed by elephants, and mainly because farmers are trying to protect their agricultural produce, and the elephants are trying to survive, and that's what happened. It's a conflict. It's a classical human conflict. I was interviewed on Indian television, and I tried to talk about it. I say I'm not angry. I'm not bitter at the elephant. It's their last stand. That's what they're doing. Yeah, that's the story.
My goodness, what a story. What an amazing, amazing story. Well, I tell you what, can you tell us briefly about what you do at TDA Cycling and some of the plans coming up so people can have experiences like this, the good part, not getting, crushed by an elephant, but the adventure. They can have the adventure. Tell us about that.
So the company expanded from the first tour, where on a normal year we have now 9, 10 tours, and they're usually not the classical 2 weeks holidays. They're usually anywhere from 5 weeks. 5 weeks to as long as 5.5 months. Our longest trips are now what we call the North American Epic, which starts in Taktayaktaq in northern Canada by the ocean, northern oceans, and goes all the way to Panama. And then we have another 5.5-month trip that starts in Colombia and goes all the way to Ushuaia, Argentina. These are 5.5 months adventure like no others. We do those every 3 years. Different, but we have trips like that. We have Tour d'Afrique that happens every year. We have European trips. We have Asian trips. We have trips all over. But COVID is COVID, and we are not doing these trips for the time being. We have a wonderful trip coming up this year across USA. First time ever for me to cycle across USA. We have a trip from California to Georgia, the southern approach. We have a couple of Canadian trips for later this summer. We are trying to do a Patagonia adventure later this summer, and then hopefully by January, hopefully we go back to our regular trips. We do have a trip, the Tour d'Afrique, supposed to start in mid-January. We canceled this one this past year, and we have several other ones next year planned. If you go to our website, tdaglobalcycling.com, you'll see our calendars, our plans for next 2, 3, 4 years. We have Indian trip, we have a Madagascar trip, we have a trip in Asia called Bamboo Road, another one called Road to Shangri-La. Some of those trips are every 2 years. Some of them are the big expedition, except for the African ones, are every 3 years. The African one is the most popular, the most iconic trip, I think, that we organize. And not only we, there's a new book right now, interesting enough, just 2 days ago, about cycling the world, highlighting different trips. And on my LinkedIn page 2 days ago, it popped out. And what is the picture that it's showing? Showing a Tour d'Afrique. There's been lots of books now about iconic cycling, and the Tour d'Afrique is almost one of the top first, second, or third highlighted. So it is a very unique adventure for people who want to do this. The Silk Route we do as well. It's a unique adventure historically, very. That one started used to start in Beijing to Istanbul. Then we did Shanghai to Istanbul. Now we do again Beijing to Istanbul. We have, the route sometimes change because of geopolitics or because of other issues that come up. So, for example, the Silk Route now goes through Mongolia. We didn't used to go that way. But sometimes some of these countries are, become a challenge, meaning the closed borders, they have issues. So we modify them. Sometimes we think something is more interesting than what we used to do. Sometimes, like in Africa, we change the route because they have paid the roads. Those wonderful roads that we used to go are now paid, which is nothing wrong with paved roads, except the traffic becomes so dangerous and so packed. The old rule in transportation, build a new road, a new highway, and between 5 years is completely filled up. Well, it works in US and it works in Africa. So that's part of the problem. So we don't want to endanger people unnecessarily. And so we change the route. We go on dirt road or we make a different approach, and so on. So, but it's always interesting. It's never the same. Every trip.
This is what I do, is bike touring, and I've guided some. I guided a cross country, a coast to coast trip last year. Actually, 2020 was my first one, and it was a relay with the company I worked for, and the logistics and the planning and everything that went into that. I can't even imagine doing dozens of these. Just so many that you do on such a large scale. Take some skill. Take some absolute skill.
I think we are unique. I think the New York Times several years ago, when they did a story on us, called us the leading long-distance cycling operator. Sometimes I joke around with my guys and people around that we are really a logistic company. They just happen to take cyclists across the road.
Right. That's all it is. Yeah, it really is logistics.
We have a tremendous team. Our people are very unique, tremendous skills under pressure. And that's what I was, sometimes we have clients who happen to complain because they've been on a 2-week holiday with some other company and they've been treated really, really well. And they said, your tour leader is not like this and not like that. And I said, my tour leader may not be what you expect from other, but when you're in real trouble, we need someone who's going to really be cool under pressure when unexpected happen. Well, that's my guys, that's my, and I say guys in terms both males and females, because I had some remarkable females working for our organization. We have done well. We have people from around the world, literally every trip. That's another nice part about our trips, that you usually average 10, 11 nationalities, and you make friends for life, because as you know, on a long distance trip, something happened after 2 weeks when you were the same crowd. You start creating real bonds, and sort of bonds that people may have in military when they spend 2 years of working for police when they're under stress situation. It's a real brotherhood. And that's the nice part about these trips. You create such a camaraderie, such a strong bond that, and I have, with participants who were clients and, were friends, we now exchange emails, we go visit each other and so on, because it's just such a bond on this trip.
So cool what you've built and been able to do for a living. This is really admirable for sure. And you've got plenty of stories to back it up. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Oh, God, I don't know. My instinct is always, people are always reluctant to step into something new. And I said, I'm not just talking about cycling in general. I said, just dare yourself, because you'll find that majority of things that you think you couldn't do or you find difficult, etc., are really, you find exactly opposite. Not only you can do them, but you find you learn something and it gives you such satisfaction, you feel that you're living well, you're doing things, you're stretching yourself. I always preach that. And if somebody wants to go on my blogs, periodically I write something about, we have a trip now for the first time where we're doing bikepacking. I'm 69 years old. I'm going to go bikepacking for the first time in my life.
That's exciting.
And I have no idea, I'm not in great shape, particularly after a year off, but, you got to push yourself a little bit. And then at the end, I come home and I'm tired and exhausted, or not even home, coming to a 10, I'm exhausted and But, half an hour later, I feel like this is great. I'm feeling so much invigorated. So my recommendation always to people is just don't give yourself an excuse, because much of the time what we do about everything in life is we're giving ourselves an excuse not to do things. So that's the advice I have.
Well, Henry, this has been very inspiring. I'm excited again to get out there and tour. I know we were all kind of waiting last year, but I think we're going to be able to do it again here soon, and I'm excited about that. So thank you for what you're doing, for encouraging folks to get out there and make it happen. That's what the show's all about.
Thank you.
All right, yes, sir. All right, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Finally, a bed that senses snoring and automatically responds. Meet the Ergo Smart Base from Tempur-Pedic, our first system that detects snoring, then automatically adjusts by raising the bed. And now during the Tempur-Pedic Summer of Sleep, all Tempur-Pedic mattresses are on sale, with savings up to $500 on adjustable sets. Get your best sleep, all night, every night. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
Oh, now they need to see my birth certificate. Honey, where do we keep the birth certificates?
Why?
Buying socks?
Socks. I'll check upstairs.
It's easy to be unsafe online.
You're the best!
Now it's easy to help protect yourself. Norton 360 with LifeLock gives you device security, a VPN for online privacy, and identity theft protection, all in one. Opt in to cyber safety. Save 25% or more off your first year at norton.com/news.